Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. This is Michelle Esser from Young Survival Coalition. For folks who don't know, YSC is the premier organization focused on the unique needs of young women who are diagnosed with breast cancer. YSC offers resources, connection, and education so women feel supported and empowered. And we're proud to bring you a new series of live streams called Take a Stand. These live streams will be focused on legal issues pertinent to young breast cancer survivors and co-survivors. Support for this web series was provided by Judges and Lawyers Breast Cancer Alert, and we thank them for their support. Before we start, we'd love for everyone viewing to please take a very short survey about your knowledge of this topic. We're posting the link to the survey in the comments, or you can type in bit.ly capital Y, capital S, capital C, survey 1. That address is case sensitive. Again, it's bit.ly capital Y, capital S, capital C, survey 1. The survey is super short, so you can fill it out quickly while I introduce our expert. And if you fill out the survey, you'll be eligible to win an Amazon gift card. If you're worried about missing any of the broadcasts, you can just hit pause on the video and come right back. Now, as you all know, career can be a huge concern for young adults who've been diagnosed with breast cancer. So I'm happy to welcome Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers to our conversation today. Cancer and Careers empowers and educates people with cancer to thrive in their workplace by providing expert advice, interactive tools, and educational events. We're going to be discussing your legal rights when it comes to career and work at all phases of your breast cancer experience, and we want to hear from you. If you have questions for Rachel, go ahead and leave those in the comments, and we'll try to answer them during the stream. So let's dive into the conversation. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this important topic.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So our first question for you is, if you are working when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, what are your employment rights?
Sure. So I think the first thing to point out as we start this conversation is that I myself am not an attorney. I'm an oncology social worker, but I do have a grasp of these laws, and I'm going to be speaking about them broadly. And the importance of kind of having this broad understanding is so that you have a foundation to look at your own circumstances, and if you think you're having a problem, to dig a little bit deeper, but also because it's sometimes scary to think about the law, right? So when we think about the law in connection with our jobs, we often think like, that the law is something that we try to stay on the right side of so that we don't get in trouble. But the fact is that when it comes to thinking about balancing work and cancer, laws are often key tools in making all of that come together in a successful way. So specifically, the key law that can be used in employment situations is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is a federal law. It's also called the ADA. And being a federal law, it does apply in 50 states. But there are certain requirements that you have to meet in order to use the law and have the protections. So the first requirement actually has to do with the employer that you work for specifically. They need to have a minimum of 15 people also working for them. The second requirement is that you personally have the necessary skills, training, certifications in order to do your job. So in other words, you need to be qualified to do the job. And then the third is that the symptoms or side effects that you're experiencing meet the ADA's definition of what a disability is. And then if you do meet all of these three qualifications, there are two protections that are provided. The first is protection against discrimination. And then the second is access to reasonable accommodations. And so reasonable accommodations, simply put, are changes that can be made to either your schedule or the physical environment in which you might be working that can make it easier for you to continue working on the job, continue meeting all the requirements of your job while you are experiencing treatment or any long-term symptoms that you're still living with to a recovery phase, etc. So reasonable accommodations, we could spend a whole hour talking about reasonable accommodations, but to learn more about those, there's a wonderful website that's run by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC. It's called the Job Accommodations Network, and it can be accessed at jan.org.
Okay, great. And when you are diagnosed, do you have an obligation to tell your employer? And if you do, or you decide to tell your employer, how do you start a conversation on that topic?
Disclosure is always a very personal decision, and it's important to remember when we're thinking about disclosure that it's not an all or nothing situation. It doesn't have to be the entire enchilada that gets shared. Pieces of the story can be rolled out. But to answer your question as to whether or not you have to disclose, there is no requirement to share any information about your current health or your health history with an employer, whether that is someone that you are currently working for or a potential employer that you might be interviewing with. That said, there can be situations where you might have to share some information. So for example, if you wanted to access some of the legal protections available under the ADA, you might have to share some information in order to support why you are making the request that you're making. Similarly, if there's concerns about potential discrimination, but you haven't disclosed in the workplace, it would be kind of hard to make a discrimination claim if the employer didn't know what was going on with you. Similarly, when asking for a reasonable accommodation, you can't just say, I need this expense, ask for some information as to why. Now, when it comes to starting the conversation, so there is often a lot of anxiety and concern about getting that kind of ball rolling, which is really understandable. And it's important to remember that a person may have to have more than one conversation in the workplace. So what we usually encourage is that you start with a person with whom you feel the most comfortable talking about this issue. So for a lot of people, that is going to be a direct supervisor. Our direct supervisors are people that we usually have an ongoing conversation with. They understand what our job requirements are, what our workload is, the way that the work is distributed across the team. So that can be a really logical place to start kind of thinking about how work and treatment might come together, or returning to work might come together, whatever it is. But it's important to remember, supervisors are trained to be supervisors. So a lot of people have the experience of, getting a promotion, and part of that promotion is suddenly they're managing people. And so they're figuring out what that means and all the moving parts that go along with it as they go along. And it's entirely possible that if you sit down to have a conversation with your supervisor about how working through treatment is going to come together, you're both having that conversation. Document, which is actually a manager's kit, and is designed to carry into your employer and as something to kind of help.
Oops. Rachel, we're losing you.
What you might actually say. What the actual. Rachel, we're losing you.
A little bit. Can you just go back? You were saying, I think that some people become managers and maybe haven't been a manager before. That's when it kind of started freezing.
Yeah. Often they will receive a promotion that comes with out as they go along, all the ins and the reality possible that we need to sit down to talk to him or her about how first time. Okay. So what we've done at Cancer and Careers is to create a document that we call our management to the conversation when you sit down to have that talk, and it sort of walks through all of the key points to think about and specific laws that they may want.
Okay, Rachel, what we're going to recommend, since we're having some technical difficulties, if maybe you can leave the broadcast and come back in, And we'll see if that helps free up the internet, or I don't know the technical term, but maybe just log back out, come back in, and I'm going to go back to a couple things in the script, and then we'll keep going, if that's all right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. If you're just joining the live stream, I'm here with Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers, and we're discussing what young survivors need to know about their legal rights in the workplace. Again, if you have questions about this for Rachel, you can leave them in the comments and we'll try to answer them. There's also a survey that we're asking that you take before, or you can take it now while we're in a little bit of a break. The address is in the comment box. You can also type in bit.ly /Y, survey 1. Again, that's bit.ly /Y, survey 1. And I think we're just waiting for Rachel to come back. There she is.
Hello.
Welcome back. So I think we got that's okay. Technology.
It's a blessing.
Part about, I think, the booklet that you said Cancer and Careers have put together. So if we could continue there, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So it's called our Manager's Kit, and it can be downloaded for free through our website. And it is designed to be physically carried into the conversation that you may be having with your manager or supervisor. And in terms of what to say, the actual words to use when you hand it over, it's important to acknowledge that, your manager has a lot of things that they're about also, that you may have concerns about how this is going to come together. They have concerns too. And so to take a moment to say, I realize that, that there's a lot that you're thinking about in terms of how we're going to manage through all of this. And I want you to know that it's really important to me to continue to be work. And I found this booklet which can help us walk through the key points as we work together to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and thinking about everything that we should be thinking about. So that can be a really empowering tool to have physically in your hand when you're doing it.
Yes, I would imagine. And if a young woman believes that her employer may be discriminating against her because of her breast cancer, what should she do?
Sure. So if you feel that there is a discrimination happening, it's important to document. So if you do have an email where something was said that you feel was inappropriate, or a voicemail, make sure those get saved. Discrimination, unfortunately, or behaviors that are, questionable don't always happen in written format or recorded format, unfortunately. So taking written notes that are precise and concise and are objective, right? So describing this is what happened factually. And that way you create a written record if necessary. Talking to a supervisor, if it's not the supervisor who's causing the problem, if it's something happening with a coworker that's uncomfortable, going to human resources can sometimes help. Often it's one or two conversations that can help kind of reframe the circumstance and come up with a solution for it. And then, of course, there are sometimes cases where you want to consult with an attorney.
Okay, I think we're having some internet issues again. Rachel, can you hear me? Again, if you're tuning in, we are in the midst of a live stream with Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers. We are having a little bit of internet difficulty. We'll try and get this to continue very shortly.
Legal resources. So checking those out, those can be a great way to figure out who you might want to have a conversation with.
Okay. We did lose a chunk there, but I think we've got the gist of what you were saying overall. So a related question though is, what does discrimination look like? I mean, can you give us some examples of what?
Sure. So yeah, so discrimination can, it just
Uh-oh. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining the live stream, I'm here with Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers. We are talking about what young survivors need to know about their legal rights in the workplace. And I apologize, we are having technology, internet issues on one end. So I think she is logging back out and logging back in. That did seem to help last time. You can leave questions in the comments if we haven't hit a topic that you want to hear about yet. We still have more questions to go through, but please feel free to share your story in the comments or leave a question in the comments or something like that while we wait for Rachel to come back, which will hopefully be any second now. Again, we apologize for the delay. Remember that there is a survey. The link to that was in the comments. Please make sure you take it. It helps us to judge your knowledge before you came into the program, and then there'll be another survey at the end so we can see how your knowledge changed after hearing the program. It looks like, oh no. And oh, there she is.
Hi.
Hi. So we were talking about what discrimination looks like and how someone can know whether they may be a victim of discrimination in employment.
Sure, right. So as I was saying, and again, I'm so sorry about this. We've just gone to get an IT person to try to take a look at the situation and see if we can fix it. So as far as what discrimination might look like, it can vary. So it may be something as egregious as an email that says, due to your diagnosis, we think you're no longer going to be able to do your job. Or it may be something that's more subtle. It may look like getting passed over for a promotion or not having extra responsibilities added to your plate. Maybe a big project that you were vying for gets handed to someone else instead. So there really is a spectrum of things. And again, if there are concerns about whether or not, questions about whether or not there might be discrimination happening, all good idea to talk to an attorney, an employment attorney, a cancer rights attorney, if you want to reach out to the Cancer Legal Services Network, which I was talking about earlier. They can give you a better read on whether there's something going on.
Okay, thank you. And let's talk about a breast cancer survivor who was either not working at the time of her diagnosis or who was working but now wants to change jobs. Does she have an obligation to tell her prospective employer about the prior diagnosis?
So as I was saying earlier, there's no requirement to share information about health history either to someone that you are currently working for or to a prospective employer. But this is a question that we get asked about a lot, particularly if people have taken time off for treatment or recovery, and so they have a gap on their resume. And there's a lot of concern about, should I say something about this in a cover letter? Should I explain why this is going on, contextualize it somehow? And the fact is that, again, as I said earlier, disclosure is a very personal decision, and we always want people to do what they feel comfortable with. But the bottom line when it comes to cover letters and resumes is that they exist to really open doors to get you into interviews. And, there's limited space in a cover letter. There's limited space in a resume. And really, the purpose of those documents is to sell you as a savvy candidate and as somebody who can do the job. And so when it comes to thinking about a resume, there are ways to position the information and how it's shared. Maybe you list your skills first and then your chronological experience second, so that gap doesn't seem to be standing out so much. We actually at Cancer and Careers run a resume review service, which is a free service where people can upload their documents online, and we pass it along to a career coach who will review it for free and provide feedback. And so that can be a great resource for somebody who is concerned that there may be a gap on their resume. But the bottom line is that talking about it in a cover letter, talking about it in a resume, talking about it in an interview. There's no requirement to do it, and there are ways to get around the gap.
Okay. And what if someone has metastatic breast cancer? Does that change your answer at all as to whether they need to say anything to their employer?
So again, no requirement, but I think that, one of the big stresses that comes with metastatic cancer is this sort of understanding that it's that the reality, it's going to be an ongoing reality, right? And so oftentimes there's a lot of pressure that survivors will put on themselves. And this is actually true not just for patients living with metastatic illness, but survivors in all stages, that there's this sense that not sharing the information is akin to lying. And they don't want to start off by telling a lie. But the fact is that, again, because there's no requirement to share that health information, it's an omission. It's an omission that, again, is not relevant to the conversation. What's relevant to the conversation is what you bring to the table. And so I think the challenge is often to move beyond the cancer piece of your identity and realize that, there's what you're selling is the experience. What you're selling is the skill set. What you're selling is the dynamic human that you are, who can make a difference, make an impact at the organization. And the fact is that no one ever shares everything about who they are, either in a job interview or even after they've been hired. Nobody walks into a job interview and says, I'm a clock watcher. 4:59, I am out the door Monday through Thursday, and 4:30 on Fridays because time is money. Nobody ever says that. So it's, but there's often this pressure, often this higher standard that survivors will hold themselves to. And so if a question does come up in an interview about a gap on a resume or what someone may have been doing during time off, what we recommend is a verbal technique that's called the swivel. And so that involves acknowledging a cancer-related comment and then inserting the word "and" into the middle of it and kind of pivoting the conversation around to an area where they feel comfortable talking. So if someone were to say, can you tell me what you were doing during this gap on your resume? You might say, well, I realized that what I was doing wasn't fulfilling me, so I decided to take a step back and think about what might be more meaningful. And here's how I think that my management skills can really help support the mission of this organization, right? So people will pick up a conversation from where you leave it off. And by, creating that opportunity to move the conversation forward, again, focusing on the topic at hand, which is really why you think you're the most savvy candidate for the job.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I think that's some great points in there. If you're just joining a live stream, again, I'm here with Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers, and we're discussing what young survivors need to know about their legal rights in the workplace. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments and we'll try to answer them. Rachel, are you okay if we go a few minutes past 12:30?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And where can our viewers learn more about employment issues related to cancer?
Sure. So a ton of information. So we have, our website is available in both English and Spanish, and we have lots of articles on legal rights as well as various practical realities that go into implementing those protections in the workplace. And then, of course, a whole lot of other practical tips about working through treatment. We have a number of publications that are available in English and Spanish, including our manager's kit, which I mentioned. All of those can be downloaded for free, or we'll ship them for free anywhere in the United States. We run 10 webinars that are geared specifically for patients and survivors throughout the year. So I encourage everyone to check those out for information as well. Additionally, Triage Cancer, which is the website that I mentioned earlier, is a content partner of ours, has fantastic resources about all sorts of laws and really makes them easy to understand and easy to wrap your head around. So they're triagecancer.org. And then, of course, there are government websites that have great information about various legal protections. The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is the branch of the government that oversees the ADA. And so they are eeoc.gov. And again, I mentioned Ask Jan earlier, which is a resource for thinking through and looking up and learning more about reasonable accommodations. So that's the Job Accommodation Network at askjan.org.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So I think we do have some questions that have come in. What is the best way to explain to a potential employer about a gap in employment following being terminated for no reason other than having cancer? They said you have attendance issues, but all missed work was due to cancer appointments. I can't explain that termination without telling them it was medical problems.
Sure. So what you might say instead of I had a medical issue, you might say that I had a family issue that required attention and it's now resolved. Mm-hmm. And then swivel, right? So, well, it wasn't a great fit. I had a family issue going on that required a lot of attention, but that's now resolved and I'm really excited to get back in the workforce. And why, what about your organization is appealing to me?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
And do employees...
So, and I think that, and I just want to say really quickly, like when you're thinking about those swivels, you can acknowledge the comment broadly, right? I think for a lot of people who are living with cancer, cancer is often at the forefront of their mind, right? But for the person, the interviewer who's sitting across the table, that's not what's in the forefront of their mind. What they're thinking about is this person going to be the last person that I interview because they're going to be a perfect fit, right? Is this person someone that I can support in coming on board? They want you to be the solution to their problem. Their problem is they have a position that needs to be filled. So to be broad, right, and acknowledge that you're a human and say it's a family issue or, I needed to take time for me or whatever it was, but then stay professionally focused is really the key there.
That's great. And do employers care about a gap in employment, or does it just depend on the type of job that you do?
So there was actually a really interesting study that was done by the website careerbuilder.com. And subsequently it was picked up on by the Harvard Business Review as well. And in it, they talked to hiring managers. And they found that a significant percentage of them post the economic downturn in 2008 had gotten more and more used to seeing gaps on resumes for all sorts of reasons. So whereas there was maybe a moment in time where a gap in a resume was a red flag, we're not really living in that place anymore. And so for some people, it may be a concern, right? You can't generalize about anyone. We certainly can't generalize about employers and what they want. But we are living in a world where people are more and more used to seeing gaps for all types of reasons. It's entirely possible that you wouldn't get asked about a gap on a resume. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that the other thing to keep in mind too is that there are ways to talk about what you did during a work gap that can be meaningful. So if you did volunteer work when you weren't working, that's staying engaged, that's still learning skills, that's something that you can talk about. This is what I did during the gap on my resume. If you took a great way to stay connected to industry, and so that demonstrates that necessarily you were still learning and you were still thinking and you were still engaging in your field. And there are lots of resources for free classes now online. A quick Google search, you can find a ton of them. And it's a way to, again, to have things to talk about. So that you're not stuck saying, well, I took time off, period, end of conversation. I took a step back, but this is what I did while I was doing the other things that I needed to attend to.
Right. Gotcha. Oh, that's great. Thank you. And then chemo brain. So this question, I belong to a knowledge industry and a researcher. I had cancer. Since I had cancer, I've given all the research which shows that the brain working will not be the same now. And research is needed to prove this thing about foggy brain, whether or not it would affect any team lead who would never want to hire. So I guess chemo brain is a reality for our population, and how should that be addressed? How can they address it? What do you do about that?
Sure. So it is absolutely a reality. I will say that it is the #1 side effect that we get asked about by people who are working through treatment or who are returning to work. And I think the key thing to keep in mind when it comes to chemo brain is that there aren't any magic bullets, working while this brain fog is happening. It's really about going back to basics. So minimizing distractions in your workspace, whether that means clearing away clutter or setting appointments with yourself on the calendar where you're going to be specifically working on one task and then disconnecting, right? Not being afraid to log out of your email for a couple of hours so that those little ghost notifications aren't popping up at the bottom of the window. Turning off your cell phone, like that. The reality is that people aren't good at multitasking. Cancer piece of the conversation aside, human brains just really aren't designed to optimally focus on more than one thing at a time. So really being patient with yourself and letting go of that idea of multitasking. Make a prioritized to-do list and do one thing at a time and cross it off. If you're going to check out from your email for a while, let your team know that, these 3 hours I'm going to be focused on X, Y, and Z, but then I'll be back online at 4 o'clock, because that can go important when it comes to maintaining focus at work. Stress is often a really big enemy to focus. And so, having a bottle of essential oils on your desk and putting a couple drops in your hand and then just suddenly, breathing in like this, no one will know what you're doing, but it can help you calm down. Similarly, taking a walk, listening to some music, so thinking about the self and stay grounded can really improve the ability to focus.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you notice that job applications will ask you if you are or have ever been disabled, and they include cancer as the example of a disability. What is that about? Why are they asking that? And should you respond to it? So I think Rachel is frozen. Rachel, can you hear me? Excuse me. So again, if you're tuning in, we are in the middle and almost at the end of our live stream with Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers, discussing what young survivors need to know about their legal rights in the workplace. And we had just asked a last question of Rachel, and she was having internet issues, and it looks like perhaps dropped off. So I will give her a few more seconds to see if she can come back in. If not, we will wrap it up. Just a reminder that there is a survey to take. You can take it now, or if, there's still a couple minutes left, you can still take it. That address for the survey is in the box, the comment box. And then immediately following this, oh, she might be back. Immediately following this, you will also get a link for another survey. And the goal there is to measure knowledge gained.
Hello?
Yes. Hi, Rachel. Welcome back. All right. So I think we were on our last question, which was about when you apply for, oops. Oh no, I think she might be gone again. Okay, so I think at this point we will just wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to say a big thank you to Rachel Becker of Cancer and Careers for her valuable insights today and her persistence and keep dialing back in despite her internet issues. We really appreciated her time and all of her effort. For all of you who watched, we have another survey that we'll be sending you, so keep an eye out for that. And finally, a big thank you to the Judges and Lawyers Breast Cancer Alert, which provided support for this series, which we very much appreciated. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time.